Good day, my name is Christelle from France de Klerk, Independent Technical Analyst. The first request on our list this morning is the Rand against the British Pound. Now we can at the moment see this currency pair is in oversold territory, which means the Rand can easily weaken against the pound again. Very, very important. These are weekly graphs, and at the moment, the Rand is consolidating below that red line, which represents the 40-week moving average. That means for a long-term investor, a 3-month plus view means I expect a stronger Rand against the British pound. Only when the Rand starts to consolidate above that red line again, the 40-week moving average, can I say that my expectation is a weaker Rand against the British pound. Now at the moment we are also seeing a double top formation, or even some might even say, Christelle, this is a triple top formation. Why? Because it's got two touching points on a neckline. So if this Rand starts to strengthen further and changes this neckline into a resistance, this triple top formation will be confirmed. That means we can easily see the Rand, the full length of the triple top is, you can either use, it's a little bit skewed there, nevertheless. You can use the strongest or the longest one, any of the legs, and you project the length of that loop downwards from where the neckline has confirmed this confirmation, and that means we can see the Rand back at 2081, assuming the full formation play out against the British pound. Now only when the Rand starts to consolidate above the highest point of the triple top, and that is 24 Rand 47, only when on a line graph, only when the Rand starts to consolidate above that level of 24.47 can I assume that this warning formation is off the table, and I expect a weaker Rand going forward. Because of this oversold situation, we can easily first see some weakness again, right? Because some investors want to make use of this opportunity and say, listen, I can see the probability of a weaker Rand is there. I want to make use of that. And then we can easily see a bounce, maybe back to that 40-week moving average, back to 23 Rand 56, or even back to that top of 24.47. So the ideal place will be when this triple top formation is confirmed, when the stochastic is a little bit on a higher level, which will be difficult, right? Because it will obviously be after a pullback, because the neckline is so much lower than where the tops are sitting at. But it makes it very dangerous to trade or consider a short position in this case when my stochastic is this oversold. Why? Because this elastic band has got a lot of room for upside, and we want to hit our opponent when the boxing ring, when it's in the corners. I want to consider a short or take profit when my stochastic or any other overbought or oversold indicator is in overbought territory, and I want to expect a bounce, or I want to accumulate or buy or go long when my stochastic or any other overbought or oversold indicator is in oversold territory, because then my probability for a bounce to higher levels is so much higher. So the ideal then is to preempt it a little bit, go back to maybe a candle, wait for a turnaround formation or a shooting star, a hanging man, something that indicates there's selling pressure in overbought levels, and that's when you consider taking profit. But at the moment, my expectation here is, considering this oversold situation, and if I look at my candle, a little bit of optimism with that long lower shadow in this week's candle, I expect a little bit of weakness in my Rand against the British pound. But take note, ladies and gentlemen, of this triple top formation below that neckline, and where's that sitting? At 22 Rand 61. Below 22 Rand 61, this triple top formation will be confirmed, and then the expectation is a stronger Rand against the British pound going forward. Mondi, ticker on our exchange MNP, at the moment in overbought territory. So one, that overbought box is ticked. However, look at my blue line, that K percentage line within my stochastic indicator. It's still pointing upwards. Confirmation of probability for more downside is there when that blue line, because that is the shorter moving average of the two, right? Between the orange line and the blue line. The shorter one is the blue line, which means it will move faster. It will react faster to a move in the price action than the orange line. So once that blue line starts to break downwards through the orange line, that's been referred to it in overbought territory as a negative divergence. And if we look at our candles then, we can say, hey, last week's candle is a clear spinning candle, right? Both shadows, my upper shadow and my lower shadow, is almost the same in length, and I've got a fairly small real body. That tells me indecision. That is a type of doji candle. It tells me, listen, they were not sure, investors were not sure what to do with Mondi. So the expectation then is confirmation of weakness or selling pressure, considering this overbought situation, will only take place when the low of last week, waiting at 352.70 Rand, starts to change into a resistance. And optimism or a warning formation of more downside will be wiped off when last week's high of 374.85 Rand changes into a support again. Why? Because last week's high show me at what level was the last buy and sell price, and at what level, because it's a high, was the buyers, the bulls, the strongest. And that is at 374.85. Why? Because that was the high of the session, and ever since then the share price started to come down, which tells me that the sellers were the strongest. Now, a candle graph is nothing else than plotting, or in a graphical way, tries to show what the psychological thinking, what the sentiment is of the buyers and the sellers. We've always said, no matter how powerful, beautiful, positive a company might look on their financial statements or even in their management accounts looking forward, the graph tells us what investors think of that share price at the time. All right, considering all the news in the world, considering the local news, international news, whatever the case might be. And that tells me where is the saturation point. And only when that last week's high starts to change into a support again, in other words, it starts to become a floor again, can I say, listen, the buyers are becoming stronger and they are taking out the sellers, because there is investors that are prepared to buy at higher levels than before. Right, so that's what the candles and that representation of the shadows represent. Now, if we see a pullback, which we maybe expect if it becomes a negative divergence, we are sitting here with a possible double top formation. And I call this a double top because this second loop is not as high as the previous two, right? So I want to call this a double top formation, which again means it's a warning formation, implying that we can see downside should and if that neckline starts to change into a resistance. And that is waiting at 317.27 Rand. Now a double top, triple top, and a head and shoulder formations are all warning patterns, implying that the top of that instrument's rally is in place, right? So the expectation is that we can see downside. So at the moment, for a long-term view, we are still above that 40-week moving average, which says to me that the long-term sentiment is still positive. However, should Mondi start to retrace and that 331.19 Rand, which represents my 40-week moving average, starts to change into a resistance again, can I say, hey, be careful, my sentiment towards this instrument has changed to negative for the long term, and maybe one should consider taking profit. But the best place to take a profit is when an instrument is overbought, right? Combined with a negative divergence and a turn around candle or pattern. Why? Because there is a myth. And often when new investors approach the market, they look at a graph and say, oh, I can buy it there and I'm going to sell it at the top. There's one big variable that you do not take into account when looking at the graph and you are outside of the market, and that is your own emotions. Because fear and greed is a beast that haunts you whether you're in the market or out of a share, especially if you want to buy some. And that is a very difficult variable to manage. So you can't eat the whole cake. It's a myth. You're not going to buy the share there, keep it, don't worry about the pullback, and then sell it there at the top. That's not going to happen because your emotions are involved. Human psychology is involved. Fear and greed is involved. So if you can't eat the whole cake, because that's a myth, you take the slices. You only eat a piece of cake. And if you do that every single day, every week, every month, your account will grow over time. And that is all you want to do. You want your account to grow over time. So take the easy money, take the profits when the instrument is overbought, and only buy or accumulate when the instrument is oversold. Now, there's no such thing as a perfect indicator. Remember, it's a science. So if I take a granule of baking soda and I throw it into vinegar, it will make a small spark, right? If I take a full cup of baking soda and I throw it into vinegar, it will probably boil over. And that is what the candle represents. As soon as there's a warning formation or a warning candle with a long upper shadow combined with a negative stochastic, a negative divergence on an overbought stochastic, it tells me the amount of granules of baking soda within this vinegar pot is increasing. So the probability is there that I will see an action. It's not exact. If your baking soda, might be from a different brand, it will take a lot longer than it overflows. The point of my illustration is that it is not perfect. All right, so you work with possibilities and probabilities. And last week candle shows me where the saturation is of a high, where the buyer started to lose momentum, and where the low is where the seller started to lose momentum because the price they were managed to push the price all the way higher again. And the low of last week is 352.70 Rand, and below that level we can see, listen, the probability is there that I can see lower levels going forward. There's a share that I definitely want to discuss, and that was on our request here from Tebogo, and that is Telkom. Now, a very important thing happened on Telkom that I've had it on my radar for a while, but I want to keep that on my radar, and that is volume. In the week of the 15th of April, Telkom experienced some more volume, and very important, the share has stopped making new lows. It's consolidating sideways. What does that tell me? It tells me that the sellers are not that strong anymore. They are not that fierce to sell at these levels anymore. And that the buyers are just keeping the price to consolidate sideways. Now, yes, the spike in volume, which was about 11.25 million shares traded at the time. Yes, the bar shows red, but it is only red because that week's candle is red. When the share price, and let me restate that, if the share price starts to rise from these levels after a spike in volume, that tells me that the sellers have dried up and that there are only buyers left. Very important. Look at my stochastic. A positive divergence. That blue line has started to break upwards through my orange line. Tick. That means probability for a bounce. Now, when the share price, if the share price starts to consolidate above last week's high, and that is 25.47 Rand, and continues to consolidate above that, I can say, listen, this is becoming a strong, solid support, a strong, solid base. The expectation is more upside. Very, very important level of resistance that needs to be overcome is my 40-week moving average, and that is waiting at 26.21 Rand. Now, we've got a window there, right? The window starts in the week of the 8th of April, and that low is 26.28 Rand, and coming from the top side, it closes in the week of the 15th of April at a level of 26 Rand, right? So there's a small window there. Now, that gap will remain open as long as the buyers are weak. As soon as the buyers become stronger, they will probably go and close that gap. Now, the rules around gaps, especially on weekly graphs, is they always remain open and they always get closed no matter how long it takes. I assume that the momentum to the bottom is in place as long as that gap remains open at the top. However, as soon as that gap starts to close, which is very close to my 20, it's in fact within my 24 and 40-week moving average range, that will also give me an indication to say, hey, the buyers are becoming really, really strong here. The sellers have dried up, and maybe we can see some more upside. Critical level is that 26.21 represented by my 40-week moving average. And I want to go because I've used the line graph to identify this horizontal line because it goes back to the week of the 15th of May when? 2023. And we are in the week of the 15th of May 2024, right? Very interesting. Again, science. So at the moment, My low on a line graph, or my critical level of support on a line graph, is 24.47, and that is the level that has to remain in place in order to sustain some upside for Telkom. Obviously, resistance level 26.21 my 40 week, and then obviously that week of the 25th of March, 29 Rand 98. I'm going to keep this one on my radar. Very important. Keep to your position size. Don't overexpose yourself to any share. We know they've got a lot of work ahead of them, but the technical graph is implying that optimism might be possible here if that level of 24.47 remains in place. Don't forget to send through your request via email or Twitter. Have a fantastic week. Take care.